What if a single sentence from a 10-year-old could stop the world's smartest man in his tracks? What if that sentence made a packed auditorium go dead silent and the live stream pause with disbelief? That was the moment the world met Jonah Reed. It was supposed to be a day like any other at the Global Futures Summit in Los Angeles, a showcase of innovation, featuring leaders in artificial intelligence, climate tech, and, of course, space exploration. A sleek black stage, glowing blue LED lights, and a rotating screen behind the speakers displayed a looping banner, "Inventing Tomorrow." People had flown in from all over the globe, but no one knew that the real headline wouldn't be a product launch or a surprise guest. It would be a kid, a quiet boy in a hoodie, seated in the last row, barely taller than the adults around him. Elon Musk had just finished a panel titled "The Next Frontier, Humanity Among the Stars." He spoke confidently, as he always did, about Mars colonization, about interplanetary species survival, about expanding the light of consciousness. The crowd was energized, some even ecstatic. Phones were out, tweets flying. The moderator turned toward the audience and invited questions. A few hands shot up. Industry professionals. University students. Policy advisors. Then, one hand rose slowly, almost hesitantly, from the back. The moderator pointed. "Yes, young man in the gray hoodie, what's your name?" The boy cleared his throat into the mic. "Jonah. From Colorado." The crowd turned, surprised. A few chuckled politely. Elon nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, Jonah." Jonah didn't smile. He didn't stammer. He simply asked, "If your dream is to leave Earth, what does that say about your faith in humanity?" The room fell into silence. The air felt heavier. Elon froze. His eyes narrowed slightly, like someone who had just heard an unfamiliar frequency. For a second, he didn't answer. Not because he was offended, but because he was actually thinking. It wasn't the question he expected. Elon finally said, "That's a good question." The audience remained silent, waiting. What was supposed to be a PR soundbite session had shifted into something deeper, something more honest. Elon leaned forward. "I don't want to leave Earth because I don't believe in it," he said slowly. "I want to create options. Insurance. Humanity has made a lot of mistakes, sure. But I believe we can fix them. Space is not an escape plan, it's a step forward." Jonah didn't respond. He just nodded. Elon looked back at the boy. "What do you think?" Jonah hesitated. Then, just before the mic was taken away, he said, "I think if we spent half as much time fixing Earth as we do trying to leave it, maybe we wouldn't need insurance." The moderator tried to move on, but the tension remained. The live stream chat exploded. "Who is this kid? Did a 10-year-old just mic drop Elon? Musk looks like he saw a ghost." That moment would be replayed millions of times in the coming days. But in the moment itself, Jonah felt none of it. He only felt his heart racing, his palms sweating, and the overwhelming urge to disappear. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He wasn't even sure why he'd raised his hand. Maybe because the words had been bouncing around in his head for days. Maybe because he was tired of hearing adults act like they had all the answers. Maybe because this was his one shot, and something inside him told him to take it. In the audience, his sister Emily gasped when she heard his voice. She hadn't even known he was going to speak. She clutched her backpack tighter, her eyes fixed on her little brother. Jonah had always been different. Not just smart, strange. Strange in the way geniuses often are. From the time he was 3, he'd been fascinated by how things worked. Took apart clocks. Tried to rebuild their mother's blender. At 6, he was reading textbooks. At 7, he asked Emily if atoms were lonely. She'd laughed, thinking it was a joke. But his eyes were serious. Always serious. Their parents had died in a car accident when Jonah was barely 5. Emily was 20 then, in her second year of med school. She dropped out that same week. Became his legal guardian. Got a job waiting tables. And in the years since, she had done everything she could to give Jonah a normal life. But Jonah was never meant for normal. He didn't make friends. He didn't play sports. He didn't go to birthday parties. He built things. Devices that didn't quite work but almost did. He wrote in notebooks, sketched impossible machines, read white papers most PhDs would find dense. Emily worried about him constantly. Worried he was lonely. Worried he was too smart for his own good. Worried he'd one day disappear into his own world and never come out. So when he got invited to this summit, the first real recognition of his mind, she insisted they go. Even if it meant missing shifts. Even if she had to borrow from their emergency fund. Even if Jonah looked terrified. You belong in that room, she told him the night before. Even if you don't think you do yet. Jonah hadn't responded. He just looked out the hotel window, eyes on the stars. He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want attention. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand why people dreamed of escaping a world they hadn't finished building. Why someone as smart as Elon Musk didn't spend all his time trying to heal the planet they already had. He admired Elon. But he also questioned him. Jonah's mind worked in contradictions. That's what made him so rare. And when he asked that question, when the words left his mouth, it wasn't to be clever or dramatic. It was because he needed to know. In the hours after the panel, while journalists clamored to find out more about him, while clips of the exchange dominated news feeds, Jonah and Emily slipped out a side exit. They walked quietly down a corridor of the convention center, neither of them speaking. Finally, Emily said, "You okay?" Jonah nodded. "I think so. You kinda blew up the internet, you know." He shrugged. "I didn't mean to. You meant what you said, though." He looked at her. "Yeah. I did." She put her arm around his shoulder. "Then I'm proud of you." They sat in silence for a while, just the two of them. A sister who gave up everything to raise a kid she barely understood, and a boy who had just shifted the global conversation with a single sentence. At that moment, neither of them could have imagined what came next. Not the invitations. Not the backlash. Not the private message from Elon Musk himself, requesting a meeting. But all that was still to come. For now, there was just the quiet aftermath of a moment that sparked something bigger than either of them could see. Something that would change their lives forever. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jonah Reed wasn't born into brilliance, at least not in the traditional sense. He didn't grow up in a house filled with scientists or scholars or even dreamers. He was born in a modest one-story home in Grand Junction, Colorado, tucked between dry hills and low-hanging telephone wires, the kind of place where neighbors still borrowed sugar and argued about football. His father, David, was a mail carrier who loved jazz music and grilled everything he could get his hands on. His mother, Lila, worked at a library and read aloud to Jonah every night, even after he learned to read on his own. They were good people. Simple, grounded, full of quiet wisdom, but they had no idea what was growing inside their son's head. Jonah spoke in full sentences by the time he was 2. He asked why the sky was blue and why people cried and whether animals had dreams. His parents answered as best they could, but sometimes they just exchanged looks over his head, unsure if they were raising a child or a puzzle they couldn't solve. By age 4, he was lining up his toys according to Fibonacci sequences. At 5, he asked his mom if time was real or just something people made up because they were afraid of forever. She cried that night, not because she was sad, but because she knew he was different and didn't know if the world would be kind to him. Then came the accident. A Tuesday morning in October. The roads were slick, and the brakes on their aging sedan failed at just the wrong moment. Jonah was in the back seat, half asleep with his headphones on. He doesn't remember the crash. He just remembers waking up in a hospital bed, his sister Emily standing over him, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She was 20 at the time, a med student with plans and pressure and the kind of ambition that didn't leave room for detours. But detours don't ask for permission. She signed the guardianship papers without hesitation. Quit school. Moved back home. Took 2 jobs, waitressing at night and working at a local clinic during the day, to keep a roof over their heads. People called her brave. She didn't feel brave. She felt tired. But she loved Jonah more than she loved her plans. That was enough. Jonah didn't talk about the accident. Not then. Not later. He shut down for almost a year, communicating only through sketches and short notes. He filled notebooks with diagrams of machines he never built, theories he couldn't explain, and questions he didn't dare ask out loud. Emily tried everything, therapy, tutors, playdates, but nothing reached him. Until one day he found an old laptop in the garage, half broken, and fixed it with pieces from a busted blender and a flashlight. That night, he stayed up past midnight watching documentaries about space, black holes, and the edge of the universe. It was like a switch had flipped. He started speaking again. Slowly, at first, then in floods of words. He asked Emily if she knew about dark energy. She said no. He said, "That's okay. I'll teach you." And he did. Over time, their relationship became a strange balance of roles. She was the caregiver, the protector, the parent. But he was the teacher, the one always pulling her into deeper questions and sharper truths. Sometimes it was hard. Jonah didn't handle emotions well. He was blunt, impatient, uninterested in social cues. Emily had to teach him how to look people in the eye, how to say thank you, how to apologize. He'd forget birthdays but remember launch codes from a 1990s NASA mission. She worried constantly. Was she doing enough? Was he lonely? Was he okay? But Jonah didn't seem to care about fitting in. He wasn't interested in parties or video games. His world was math, energy, time. His best friend was a homemade robot he named Kelvin, built from scrap metal and an old vacuum cleaner. At school, things were worse. Teachers didn't know what to do with him. He finished assignments in minutes and got bored. He asked questions they couldn't answer. Other kids mocked him. "Robot boy," they'd whisper. "Space freak." He'd sit alone at lunch, sketching quantum equations on napkins while the others talked about TikTok. Emily begged the school to offer him more. They shrugged. Budget cuts. Limited staff. "Maybe he just needs to learn how to be normal," one counselor said. She nearly lost it. "He's not broken," she snapped. "He's brilliant. He's just alone." At night, she'd sit on the couch staring at bills, wondering how she'd make rent, while Jonah quietly soldered circuits at the kitchen table. Sometimes, she'd look over and see him staring out the window, eyes locked on the moon. She'd ask what he was thinking. He'd say, "Nothing," but she knew that wasn't true. Jonah's mind never stopped. One night, a flyer came in the mail. An international contest called The Future of Humanity, backed by Tesla, SpaceX, and a handful of nonprofits. Kids ages 10 to 17 were invited to submit essays, inventions, or proposals on how to improve life on Earth or beyond. Emily tossed it on the counter and forgot about it. Jonah didn't. He read every line. Then, without telling anyone, he submitted an essay. He wrote about energy sustainability, about repurposing abandoned satellites for Earth-based data routing, about using AI to optimize irrigation in drought zones. He wrote with the kind of clarity and vision that made adult engineers pause. But he didn't believe he'd win. He submitted it under a fake name, J.R. Atlas, because he didn't want pity or curiosity. He wanted someone to see the idea, not the kid. When the rejection came, he said nothing. Deleted the email. Went back to building Kelvin. Emily noticed he was quieter than usual but didn't press. Then, 3 weeks later, another email arrived. This one was different. It said Jonah's submission had been flagged by Elon Musk himself, who requested to see it. The judging panel had dismissed it as too advanced for a child. Musk disagreed. They wanted Jonah to attend a youth panel at the summit in LA. All expenses paid. Jonah didn't tell Emily at first. He wasn't sure it was real. He thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they'd rescind the offer once they found out who he really was. But Emily found the email one night while cleaning his inbox. Her hands shook as she read it. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Jonah stared at the floor. "I didn't think I'd be picked." She pulled him into a hug. "You're going," she whispered. "We're going." He tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. "This is it," she said. "Your world just opened up." He was terrified. He didn't want cameras or crowds or people staring. But she was right. It was a door. And maybe, just maybe, it led to people who spoke his language. So they booked the flights. Packed one suitcase. Left the dog with a neighbor. And flew to LA. Jonah hated the plane ride. Too loud, too shaky. Emily held his hand the whole time. When they landed, the city felt like another planet. Noise. Lights. Billboards with faces he didn't recognize. The hotel was too shiny. The people too loud. He didn't sleep that night. Emily tried to reassure him. "Just be yourself," she said. "They invited you. You have nothing to prove." But Jonah didn't believe that. He'd spent his whole life feeling like he had to prove something, like he had to justify his existence. So when he sat in the back of that auditorium, listening to Elon Musk speak about Mars and the stars, something stirred in him. Not jealousy. Not awe. Something closer to doubt. Why were we so eager to run away from the planet we already had? Why did everyone treat space like a fresh start when we hadn't fixed what we broke? And why wasn't anyone asking that? So he raised his hand. Spoke his truth. And changed everything. Jonah Reed had never felt like he belonged anywhere, not at school, not in his town, not even in his own skin most days. The world felt like a puzzle made for someone else, with edges he couldn't fit into no matter how hard he tried. He was too quiet for the loud kids, too smart for the slow classes, too strange for the playground, too serious for video games. It wasn't that he didn't want friends, he just didn't know how to be one. The other kids didn't understand why he muttered equations under his breath or why he corrected the science teacher when she got the molecular weight of hydrogen wrong by a decimal point. They thought he was trying to show off, but he wasn't. He just couldn't help noticing when things didn't add up. At recess, he sat alone, legs crossed, scribbling on graph paper while the others played tag or tossed footballs. Sometimes he'd stare at clouds and wonder what the wind's speed had to be to move them that fast. Other times, he'd pull apart old ballpoint pens and try to rebuild them in new configurations, convinced there was a better way to make them click. Most of the time, he was invisible, and that was just fine with him. Being noticed usually meant being laughed at, and he'd had enough of that for a lifetime. But there were moments when the loneliness felt sharp, like a cold wind in the chest. Especially during lunch, when the cafeteria buzzed with chatter and laughter, and he sat at the far end of the table with nothing but a peanut butter sandwich and a notebook full of theories. Sometimes he'd glance up, hoping maybe someone would slide over and say, "Hey, what are you working on?" But no one ever did. They didn't speak his language. They never had. His teachers tried to help in the beginning, pulling him aside, offering extra work, encouraging him to join clubs. But when he started asking questions even they couldn't answer. Like why gravity doesn't fully explain the behavior of dark matter, they stop trying. One substitute teacher once called him a know-it-all in front of the class. Jonah didn't return to school for a week after that. Emily tried to talk to the principal, but nothing changed. Jonah was a square peg, and the system wasn't interested in reshaping the holes. At home, things were slightly better. At least there, he could breathe. He could sit in his garage-turned lab, surrounded by wires and circuit boards, free to tinker and imagine and build without interruption. His favorite project was a rudimentary AI system he nicknamed Fun, short for every need. It didn't really do much yet, just responded to simple voice commands and played music, but Jonah believed it could evolve. He wanted to create an AI that could read emotional tone, not just recognize speech, so people like him wouldn't have to explain what they felt. That way, maybe someone would finally understand him without him needing to translate himself first. Emily supported everything he did, even when she didn't understand it. She was always encouraging, always pushing him to believe in his worth, but she was tired too. She worked 12-hour days and carried the weight of 2 lives on her back. Sometimes Jonah heard her crying in her room late at night, thinking he was asleep. He never brought it up. He didn't know how. Emotional stuff made him feel like he was walking on marbles, slippery, unpredictable, uncomfortable. He wished he could fix her sadness the way he fixed broken machines. But people weren't machines, and he hadn't figured out how to decode her pain yet. Then there were the fights. Not constant, but sharp when they came. Jonah hated being interrupted while working. Emily hated when he ignored her for hours. He didn't like being told what to do. She didn't like being treated like she didn't matter. Sometimes they shouted. Sometimes they went silent. But they always circled back. Always tried again. Because deep down, they were all each other had. Their parents' absence hung over them like a ghost that never left the room. Jonah missed his mom's voice, the way she'd explain things without dumbing them down, the warmth of her hand on his forehead when he couldn't sleep. He missed his dad's quiet laughter, the way he'd hum jazz tunes while flipping pancakes, the calm way he'd answer Jonah's endless questions, never mocking, never dismissive. Losing them felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under him, and he was still falling, even years later. He didn't cry about it. He didn't talk about it. But the weight of it was there, in every line he drew, every formula he calculated, every silence he sank into. Grief didn't go away. It just learned how to hide better. That was part of why the summit had shaken him so much. Being in a room full of people who actually cared about the future, people who thought in big questions and abstract ideas, made him feel alive in a way he'd never known. But it also made him feel incredibly small. Like maybe he'd finally found the map, only to realize he had no idea how to read it. When he asked Elon Musk that question, it wasn't to be clever or to challenge authority. It was because he genuinely wanted to know. Was the dream to leave Earth a hopeful one, or was it a silent confession that we'd already given up on this planet? Jonah wasn't sure which answer scared him more. After the panel, the messages started flooding in. Emails. Social media DMs, journalists asking for interviews. Scientists requesting copies of his essay. Kids from around the world writing to say, "You said what I was thinking." Jonah didn't know how to process any of it. He turned his phone off. Refused to go online. Emily handled the public response, filtering out the nasty comments and protecting him from the noise. She told him the world would calm down eventually. He wasn't sure he believed her. He didn't want fame. He just wanted to understand things. Why people hurt each other, why no one ever listened, why the smartest people sometimes made the most short-sighted decisions. That night, in the hotel room, Emily asked him if he was okay. He said yes, but the truth was more complicated. He felt exposed. Raw. Like he'd peeled back a piece of himself and showed it to the world, and now he couldn't take it back. He curled up in bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to count the seconds between the city's flashing lights. The noise of LA buzzed beneath the windows like a heartbeat too fast. He missed home. Missed the quiet. Missed the way the mountains held the town in their arms. But he also felt something else, something new. He felt possibility. Like maybe there was room for someone like him after all. Maybe he didn't have to keep shrinking himself to survive. Maybe he could be exactly who he was and still be heard. That feeling scared him more than anything. Because if that were true, then he couldn't hide anymore. And hiding had always been the safest option. Emily saw it in his eyes, the storm, the hope, the terror. She didn't say much. Just sat beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the same way their mom used to sit with them during thunderstorms, no words, just presence. And for once, that was enough. Jonah closed his eyes and listened to the noise fade into a distant hum. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't dread it. He just let himself drift. Not away. Not up. But inward. Toward something waiting to be found. The morning after the youth panel, Jonah woke up with a mixture of excitement and dread tangled deep inside his chest. The city outside the window was alive, honking cars, distant sirens, people shouting in languages he couldn't quite place. But inside the sterile hotel room, the silence pressed down on him. Emily had already left for a meeting with the summit organizers, leaving him alone to wrestle with thoughts swirling like storm clouds. He pulled out his notebook, the one he carried everywhere, its pages filled with sketches, half-formed theories, and questions that no one seemed ready to answer. For a long time, he stared at a blank page. Then he began to write, if we want to save this planet, we need to start asking the right questions, not just dream about running away. It was the first time he had dared put that thought on paper. The summit itself was a blur of presentations, handshakes, flashing cameras, and speeches filled with jargon he partly understood but mostly found overwhelming. Yet Jonah's mind was focused on one thing, the disconnect. Everyone spoke about Mars as if Earth was just a stepping stone, a temporary home doomed to failure. Few acknowledged the damage already done here, the delicate ecosystems unraveling faster than anyone wanted to admit. It wasn't just about rockets or AI or solar panels. It was about responsibility, how to take care of a world that had been ignored for too long. Between sessions, Jonah wandered the sprawling conference center, feeling both out of place and oddly determined. He watched delegates huddle in heated debates about funding, watched engineers boast about new technologies, watched investors calculate profits with cold eyes. But what stayed with him was a conversation he overheard near the coffee stand, two scientists arguing about whether humanity deserved a second chance at all. "We're so far gone," one said bitterly. "Why bother trying to fix what we broke?" The words hit Jonah like a punch to the gut. If even the smartest people doubted the future, what hope was there? Later that day, Emily took him to a small garden behind the conference hall, a quiet oasis filled with blooming flowers, humming bees, and a trickling fountain. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, buzzing energy inside. "This is what I'm fighting for," Emily said softly. "Not just big ideas, but moments like this." Jonah nodded, the weight inside easing just a little. He reached into his backpack and pulled out Kelvin, the homemade robot, its metal frame scratched and worn. "I want to build more of these," he said. "Not just machines, but helpers. Tools to fix, to heal." Emily smiled. "You're already building the future, Jonah." That evening, the summit hosted a gala dinner, attended by luminaries from the tech world, government officials, and media. Jonah felt his nerves spike as they entered the ballroom, the chandeliers sparkling overhead, waiters carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. He stuck close to Emily, who introduced him to several people, including a scientist from NASA and a venture capitalist with a keen interest in green tech. But the highlight was the keynote speech by Elon Musk himself. Jonah listened, captivated by the vision Musk painted of a multiplanetary civilization, colonizing Mars, terraforming the red planet into a second Earth. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. When the speech ended, the room erupted into applause, and Elon began mingling with guests. Emily nudged Jonah forward. "Go on. Say hi." Jonah's heart pounded. He rehearsed what he might say, but the words tangled in his throat. When Elon stopped near them, Jonah blurted out, "Why do we want to leave Earth when it's the only home we have? Shouldn't we fix it first?" Elon paused, surprise flickering in his eyes. Then he smiled, a genuine, curious smile, and said, "That's a question more people should ask." The moment was brief, but it changed everything. Word spread fast. Journalists who had barely noticed the quiet kid suddenly wanted to talk to him. Social media exploded with clips of the exchange. Some praised Jonah for his courage. Others mocked him as naive. But the effect was undeniable. People were listening. The next morning, Jonah was invited to join a small panel of young innovators tasked with brainstorming solutions for sustainable living. It felt like stepping into a dream. The panel was held in a bright, glass-walled room overlooking the city skyline. Jonah sat alongside teens from around the world, girls and boys who had built solar-powered water purifiers, created apps to reduce food waste, and developed biodegradable plastics. Despite their differences, they shared a fierce determination. Jonah felt the sting of imposter syndrome but pushed it aside. When it was his turn, he shared his idea, a network of repurposed satellites equipped with AI to monitor environmental data and optimize resource distribution on Earth in real time. The room grew quiet, then buzzed with questions. How would it work? Could it be affordable? What about privacy concerns? Jonah answered as best he could, his confidence growing with each word. The moderators nodded, clearly impressed. By the end of the session, they invited him to present his concept at the closing ceremony. That afternoon, Emily took him to a local cafe to decompress. Over steaming mugs of coffee, they talked about everything and nothing. Jonah confessed he still felt overwhelmed by the attention, the expectations, and the future. Emily listened, then told him something he wouldn't forget: "You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders alone. Even the brightest stars need a constellation." That night, Jonah lay awake staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities and doubts. What if his ideas were just dreams? What if he failed? But somewhere beneath the fear, a spark glowed, a quiet voice whispering that he could make a difference. The following days passed in a whirlwind of interviews, meetings, and photo ops. Jonah learned to navigate the spotlight with Emily's help, balancing exposure with retreat. He met engineers who challenged his theories, mentors who nurtured his potential, and skeptics who questioned his every move. But he kept returning to the same truth: change wasn't easy. It was messy and slow and required more than just brilliant ideas. It needed heart. One afternoon, while walking through a nearby park, Jonah spotted a group of children playing soccer. Their laughter echoed through the trees. For a moment, he envied their carefree joy. Then he remembered why he fought: to create a future where kids like them could play without worry, where the air was clean and the planet healthy. That evening, at the closing ceremony, Jonah stepped onto the stage, his hands trembling but his voice steady. He spoke about responsibility, hope, and the power of asking hard questions. He challenged the audience to rethink what progress meant: not just technological advancement but healing, connection, and care. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Elon Musk was in the front row, nodding thoughtfully. As the lights dimmed, Jonah felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a kid from a small town anymore. He was a catalyst. A voice for change. But with that power came pressure, the kind that kept him awake at night, wondering if he was up to the task. Back at the hotel, Emily hugged him tight. "You did it," she said. "You showed them who you really are." Jonah looked out the window at the city lights stretching endlessly. Tomorrow, they'd fly home. The summit would be over. The real work was just beginning. The flight home was quiet except for the low hum of the engines and the occasional murmur of other passengers. Jonah stared out the small window at the vast patchwork of clouds below, thinking about everything that had happened over the last week. The whirlwind of emotions, the fear, the excitement, the exhaustion, mingled into a complicated knot in his chest. He thought about the summit, the people he'd met, and the overwhelming attention he'd suddenly received. It felt surreal. One moment he was an invisible kid scribbling formulas in a corner of his school, and now he was the one people listened to. But beneath the surface, doubt gnawed at him. Did he really deserve the spotlight? Was he just a kid lucky enough to ask a good question? Emily sat beside him, glancing over with a gentle smile that seemed to say, "You're going to be okay." She always had that way of steadying him, even when he couldn't find his own footing. As the plane descended toward their hometown, Jonah's mind turned to what awaited him there. He knew things would never be the same. His friends would treat him differently, his teachers might watch him more closely, and his life would be under a new kind of microscope. But part of him welcomed the change. Maybe this was his chance to stop shrinking, to finally be seen for who he truly was. When they landed, the warm, familiar air hit him like a wave, grounding him in the reality of home. The small airport was bustling with families and travelers, but Jonah felt like he was stepping back into a different world, one that hadn't changed, even though he had. They took a cab back to their modest house on the edge of town. The quiet streets, the rustling leaves, the distant hum of lawnmowers, all felt like pieces of a puzzle he was just starting to understand. Inside, Jonah's workshop awaited, a cluttered sanctuary of wires, tools, and half-built machines. He ran his fingers over the surface of his desk, the worn edges familiar and comforting. That night, sleep was elusive. His mind raced with ideas sparked by conversations at the summit, questions that demanded answers, and a vision of a future he desperately wanted to help build. At dawn, Jonah was already in his workshop, tinkering with fun. He added new circuits and tweaked the programming, hoping to improve its ability to recognize emotional cues in voices. It was slow work, but every small success felt like a step forward. Emily watched from the doorway, proud but concerned. She knew Jonah's passion was a gift but worried about how much he pushed himself. Days blurred together as Jonah poured himself into his projects, losing track of time and sometimes even meals. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from journalists, scientists, and supporters worldwide. Each notification brought a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Then came the first real challenge. A local news station contacted Emily, requesting an exclusive interview with Jonah. The spotlight was shifting from the summit to their small town, and suddenly Jonah was no longer just a curious kid, he was a symbol, a voice of a generation demanding change. The night before the interview, Jonah was restless. He practiced answers to questions he wasn't sure he'd want to hear. Would they ask about his family? His grief? His fears? Emily sat beside him, reminding him that honesty was his strongest tool. The next day, under the harsh glare of studio lights, Jonah spoke from the heart. He talked about his vision for sustainable technology, the urgency of addressing climate change, and the power of youth voices. The interviewer was captivated, pressing him on tough questions but also giving him space to explain. When the segment aired, it quickly went viral. Jonah became a fixture in national conversations about the future, invited to speak at schools, community centers, and eventually universities. Each appearance chipped away at his insecurities, but the pressure mounted. Not everyone was supportive. Social media trolls attacked his ideas, questioned his qualifications, and sometimes targeted Emily and his family. Jonah learned the harsh reality of public life, that being visible also meant being vulnerable. Despite the backlash, he found solace in unexpected places. A group of local students formed a club inspired by his work, dedicating themselves to environmental projects. Teachers invited him to collaborate on science curriculum updates. And Emily's unwavering support was a constant lifeline. One afternoon, while working on a new AI prototype designed to analyze pollution data from satellite imagery, Jonah received an email from an organization offering a grant to develop his ideas further. It was a validation he hadn't dared hope for, a tangible sign that his efforts were more than just dreams. The grant came with conditions, deadlines, reports, accountability, and Jonah felt the weight of responsibility deepen. But with it came resources. New equipment, mentorship, and a small team of interns eager to learn. For the first time, Jonah experienced the thrill of leading others, of turning solitary ideas into collaborative action. The journey was far from smooth. Setbacks came in the form of technical failures, funding hurdles, and moments of self-doubt. Yet each obstacle was met with resilience, fueled by a growing community that believed in the cause. As months passed, Jonah's project evolved into a working prototype, a network of sensors linked to AI algorithms capable of real-time environmental monitoring. The potential applications were vast, detecting pollution spikes, forecasting natural disasters, optimizing resource distribution. One evening, while presenting the prototype at a local science fair, Jonah noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Elon Musk had unexpectedly arrived, having heard about Jonah's progress. The encounter was surreal. Elon asked detailed questions, challenging Jonah to think bigger and bolder. Their conversation was a meeting of minds, a rare exchange that left Jonah inspired and energized. Elon's praise was tempered with advice to stay grounded, reminding Jonah that innovation required patience and persistence. That night, Jonah lay in bed reflecting on how far he'd come, from the lonely boy in the cafeteria to the young innovator standing on the cusp of change. He understood that the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but he felt ready. He wasn't just building technology, he was building hope. Emily joined him, her presence a quiet reminder that he was never alone in this journey. Together, they looked toward the future, knowing that the real challenge was only beginning. Jonah's story was no longer just about a kid who surprised the world with a question. It was about the power of curiosity, courage, and connection to transform fear into action and silence into a roar. As dawn broke, the first light of a new day filled the room, and with it, the promise of possibilities yet to be discovered. The buzz around Jonah's work grew exponentially after Elon Musk's unexpected visit to the science fair. The local media spotlight shifted to a national one, and soon Jonah found himself invited to conferences, panels, and even a few podcasts where experts debated the feasibility and impact of his environmental AI network. The intense attention was exhilarating but exhausting. Every new opportunity brought its own challenges, questions that required careful answers, meetings that tested his patience, and deadlines that loomed like thunderclouds. Despite the whirlwind, Jonah's core mission remained crystal clear: to create something that could genuinely help the planet, not just garner headlines. Back home, his workshop became a hub of activity. The team he assembled, volunteers, interns, and a couple of seasoned engineers, worked late into the night, debugging code, testing sensors, and brainstorming improvements. Emily was still there, a steady presence, juggling her own responsibilities while making sure Jonah didn't lose sight of balance. The prototype grew more sophisticated each week, incorporating feedback from environmental scientists and incorporating data from local pollution monitors. But one evening, disaster struck. During a routine software update, the network crashed, wiping out weeks of progress. Jonah stared at the error logs in disbelief, frustration boiling beneath his calm exterior. He felt the sting of failure deeply, the kind that makes you question if you're cut out for the task. Emily found him slumped over the keyboard, exhausted and disheartened. "It's okay," she said softly, "sometimes progress isn't a straight line. We learn more from failure than success." Jonah nodded, but the doubt lingered. That night, sleep was elusive. His mind replayed every mistake, every oversight. Could he have prevented the crash? Was the technology too ambitious? Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a message popped up on his phone from an unexpected source, a renowned environmentalist who had been following Jonah's work and wanted to offer guidance. The message was brief but powerful: innovation requires resilience. Keep pushing forward. Those words reignited Jonah's determination. He threw himself back into the work with renewed vigor, leading the team through a marathon of troubleshooting and redesign. Slowly but surely, the network came back online, better and stronger than before. The experience taught Jonah the value of patience and the importance of trusting the process, lessons that would shape his journey in the months ahead. As the system stabilized, Jonah and Emily began planning a pilot program with a nearby city eager to implement the network's monitoring capabilities. The city council was impressed by the potential to detect pollution in real time, alert officials, and inform residents, promising to improve public health and environmental policies. Preparing for the pilot required coordination with local agencies, data security measures, and community outreach. Jonah found himself stepping into unfamiliar roles: negotiator, spokesperson, project manager, all of which stretched his abilities but also deepened his confidence. The launch day of the pilot was a milestone, marked by a press event attended by journalists, city officials, and curious citizens. Jonah demonstrated how the network worked, showing live data streams and explaining how the AI algorithms could predict pollution trends and recommend actions. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many expressing hope that the technology could be scaled nationwide. Yet Jonah knew the real test was yet to come. Whether the network could perform reliably under real-world conditions and truly impact environmental decision-making. Over the next several weeks, the pilot produced promising results. Pollution levels were tracked with unprecedented accuracy, alerts were sent promptly, and local authorities began using the data to enforce regulations and launch cleanup initiatives. Jonah's system wasn't just technology, it was becoming a tool for change. But as success grew, so did scrutiny. Privacy advocates raised concerns about data collection and surveillance. Some politicians questioned the cost and feasibility of widespread implementation. Jonah faced tough questions, forced to defend his project's ethics and practical value. These challenges deepened his understanding that innovation was as much about navigating social and political landscapes as it was about technical breakthroughs. Through it all, Jonah leaned heavily on Emily's support and the growing community of allies who believed in the vision. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting with city officials skeptical about funding, Jonah and Emily walked home under a sky streaked with stars. Jonah confessed his fears of failure and burnout. Emily listened patiently, then reminded him of a truth he sometimes forgot: you're not alone in this. Change takes time, and every step forward counts. That night, Jonah reflected on the journey so far. He realized that his mission was bigger than any single project or accolade. It was about inspiring others to believe that their voices and actions mattered, even in the face of overwhelming odds. He decided to start a blog to share not just successes, but struggles, lessons, and the human side of innovation. The blog quickly attracted followers, students, activists, scientists, who found encouragement in Jonah's honesty and determination. Through this connection, Jonah discovered the power of storytelling as a catalyst for community and collaboration. Months later, Jonah received an invitation to speak at a prestigious global summit focused on climate action. It was a huge opportunity but also daunting. Preparing his speech required distilling complex ideas into a message that was clear, compelling, and authentic. He spent nights writing and rewriting, practicing in front of Emily, who offered feedback and reassurance. The day of the summit arrived, held in a grand auditorium packed with leaders, innovators, and media from around the world. Jonah took the stage, heart pounding but voice steady. He spoke not just about technology but about responsibility, hope, and the power of individual action. He challenged the audience to rethink what progress truly meant and to embrace the messy, difficult work of building a sustainable future. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, and Elon Musk approached him backstage, offering a handshake and a few words of encouragement. "Keep asking the hard questions," Elon said. "That's how real change happens." Jonah's journey was far from over. The path ahead was filled with uncertainty, but he felt ready to face it with courage, guided by the lessons of resilience, community, and the belief that even one voice can spark a revolution. And as he looked out over the horizon, Jonah knew that the kid who once asked a simple question had become a force to be reckoned with, a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected voices can shake the world. The weeks following the global summit marked a turning point in Jonah's journey. His message had resonated beyond the usual circles of tech and science enthusiasts, reaching educators, policymakers, and everyday citizens who longed for meaningful change. Invitations flooded in. Not just to speak but to collaborate on projects aimed at environmental restoration, renewable energy, and sustainable urban planning. Jonah felt both honored and overwhelmed. Each new opportunity brought with it a maze of expectations and complexities that forced him to grow in ways he hadn't imagined. Back home, the energy in Jonah's workshop shifted as his team expanded. Volunteers from nearby universities and local high schools joined, drawn by the passion radiating from Jonah's vision. Among them was Mia, a brilliant coder with a knack for problem-solving and a sharp sense of humor that lightened the intense atmosphere. Together, they refined the AI algorithms, integrating machine learning techniques that improved the network's predictive accuracy. Emily continued to juggle her work and support for Jonah, often stepping in to mediate when tensions flared during late-night brainstorming sessions. Despite the camaraderie, Jonah felt the pressure mounting. His personal life was shrinking as his responsibilities grew. Social outings became rare, and even family dinners were tinged with discussions about data models and grant applications. Yet Jonah remained determined. He believed the sacrifices were necessary to build a future worth living in. One chilly evening, Jonah and Mia stayed late, analyzing a puzzling anomaly in the data, an unexpected spike in pollution readings from a neighborhood that was supposed to be a clean zone. Intrigued and concerned, they decided to investigate in person. Walking through the quiet streets, they noticed a factory on the outskirts operating beyond usual hours, its smokestacks billowing thick clouds that tainted the night sky. They took samples and recorded evidence, realizing this violation was contributing to the pollution surge. Jonah knew this was more than a technical issue, it was a wake-up call about the real-world consequences of unchecked industry. Back at the workshop, they compiled their findings into a detailed report and presented it to the city council. The officials promised action, but Jonah sensed the resistance beneath the surface, a reluctance to challenge powerful interests. This episode deepened Jonah's understanding of the complexities in environmental activism. Technology alone wasn't enough, it required courage, advocacy, and sometimes confrontation. Meanwhile, the blog Jonah started continued to flourish. Readers from across the country shared their own stories of environmental challenges and community efforts, creating a vibrant network of voices united by hope and determination. Jonah began hosting virtual meetups, fostering dialogue and collaboration that extended far beyond his hometown. These connections reminded him that change was a collective journey. During one particularly busy period, Jonah received an unexpected call from a national news program inviting him to participate in a televised debate about climate policy. The debate was heated, with sharp exchanges between industry representatives and activists. Jonah held his ground, articulating his vision with clarity and passion, refusing to be drowned out by cynicism. The experience was both exhilarating and exhausting, reaffirming his role as a bridge between innovation and activism. Not everything was public battles and technical breakthroughs. One afternoon, Jonah received a call from his mother, who had been quietly struggling with health issues. The news hit hard, reminding him of the fragility of life and the importance of family. Balancing the demands of his growing public life with personal responsibilities became an ongoing challenge. Emily stood by his side, offering strength and perspective. "You're doing incredible things, Jonah," she told him during a quiet moment. "But remember to take care of yourself, too." Jonah took those words to heart, carving out time for rest and reflection. He rediscovered the simple joys of hiking in nearby forests, sketching ideas in his notebook without pressure, and spending evenings with his family. These moments grounded him, fueling his creativity and resilience. As the year drew to a close, Jonah's project secured additional funding from a coalition of environmental nonprofits and tech companies. The expanded resources allowed the team to enhance the network's reach, installing sensors in rural and underserved areas previously overlooked. Jonah also launched an educational initiative, partnering with schools to teach students about environmental science, technology, and activism. The initiative inspired a new generation of young people eager to make a difference. At a holiday gathering with friends and family, Jonah reflected on the journey from that first curious question to this bustling moment of impact. The kid who once doubted his voice had become a leader, a catalyst for change. Yet Jonah knew the road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges. But for the first time, he felt ready, not just to face the future but to shape it with purpose, heart, and unwavering hope. Jonah's world was expanding faster than he ever imagined, but with growth came new challenges that tested not only his intellect but his heart. As the environmental network scaled up, the pressure to produce results mounted. Every glitch, every data inconsistency, was scrutinized by partners and critics alike. Jonah found himself waking in the middle of the night, mind racing over code errors or policy hurdles. Yet amid the chaos, moments of profound inspiration kept him moving forward. One such moment came unexpectedly during a visit to a rural community suffering from severe water contamination. Jonah and his team arrived with their portable sensors, hoping to provide data that could compel action. The community was small, faces weathered by years of hardship, but their resilience was palpable. As Jonah demonstrated the technology, an elderly woman approached him quietly and said, "You're the first person who's come here with a real chance to help. Thank you." Her words settled over him like a promise, reminding him that his work was more than algorithms, it was about real lives. Back at the workshop, Jonah poured the data collected into the system, refining the network's capabilities to identify similar contamination patterns elsewhere. The implications were enormous, with the potential to alert authorities and communities before crises escalated. But with visibility came unexpected resistance. Powerful companies with vested interests began pushing back, using media campaigns to question the accuracy and motives behind Jonah's project. The attacks were personal, aimed at discrediting him and sowing doubt in public opinion. Jonah felt the sting of betrayal and the weight of being a young voice in a sea of corporate power. Emily helped him navigate the storm, reminding him that integrity and persistence were his strongest allies. "They can't silence the truth if you keep telling it," she said. Jonah's resolve strengthened, and he began collaborating with investigative journalists who helped expose environmental violations corroborated by his data. These stories stirred public outcry, prompting regulatory bodies to take action. Still, Jonah was not immune to fatigue. The relentless pace and high stakes took a toll on his mental and physical health. On a rare day off, he found himself wandering through the local park, seeking peace among the trees. The quiet brought clarity. Innovation wasn't just about invention, it was about balance, between ambition and rest, technology and humanity. This realization sparked a new direction for Jonah. He started advocating not only for environmental solutions but for sustainable innovation practices that valued well-being and ethical responsibility. Jonah also began mentoring young activists and technologists, sharing his experiences and encouraging them to find their own voices. These connections energized him, creating a ripple effect of hope and creativity. Meanwhile, the educational programs Jonah launched gained momentum. Schools integrated environmental technology into their curricula, and students started their own projects inspired by Jonah's work. One standout was a teenage girl named Ava, who developed a prototype water filtration system using recycled materials. Jonah was impressed by her ingenuity and invited her to join the team as a junior researcher. Ava's enthusiasm and fresh ideas reinvigorated the group, reminding Jonah of the power of youth-led change. As the network expanded internationally, Jonah faced new complexities, navigating different regulations, cultures, and languages. He traveled to conferences in Europe and Asia, building partnerships that broadened the impact of his project. Each trip was a learning experience, deepening his understanding of the global dimensions of environmental issues. Through it all, Jonah never lost sight of the kid who asked that unexpected question at the science summit. That moment was a beacon, guiding him through uncertainty and challenges. He knew the journey was far from over, but he embraced the unknown with courage and hope. One evening, as Jonah prepared for a keynote speech at an international climate forum, he received a message that took his breath away. Elon Musk had nominated him for a prestigious innovation award, recognizing not just the technology but the spirit behind it. The news was both thrilling and humbling. Jonah accepted the nomination with gratitude, aware that the real reward was the impact his work had on communities and the environment. On the day of the award ceremony, Jonah stood on a grand stage surrounded by luminaries and visionaries. When his name was announced as the recipient, the applause was thunderous. But instead of basking in the spotlight, Jonah used the moment to call for collective action, urging everyone to move beyond individual accolades and work together for the planet's future. The speech was heartfelt and raw, a testament to the journey from uncertainty to leadership. After the ceremony, as Jonah stepped outside into the cool night air, Emily greeted him with a proud smile. They talked about the path ahead, knowing that awards and recognition were milestones, not endpoints. Jonah's story was still unfolding, a story of resilience, innovation, and the unyielding belief that even one voice could spark change. And as the stars shone above, Jonah felt a deep sense of purpose, ready to face whatever came next with unwavering hope and determination. The recognition Jonah received at the Innovation Award ceremony opened doors he had only dreamed about. Invitations poured in from universities, tech giants, environmental organizations, and even government agencies eager to partner or learn from his work. The spotlight was brighter than ever, but with it came the relentless expectation to deliver, to innovate faster, to solve problems bigger than before. Jonah felt the exhilaration of progress mingled with the weight of responsibility pressing down on his young shoulders. One morning, as he scrolled through emails, a message caught his eye, an invitation from a nonprofit dedicated to helping marginalized communities access clean water. Their leaders explained that despite technological advances, many rural areas worldwide still lacked basic infrastructure. They asked Jonah if his network could be adapted to monitor water quality in these remote regions. The challenge intrigued him. It was a chance to extend his technology's impact beyond urban centers and affluent neighborhoods. Jonah quickly assembled his team, and they began brainstorming ways to make their sensors more affordable, rugged, and easy to deploy without extensive technical expertise. The project demanded creative problem-solving and humility. They traveled to several remote villages to understand the unique environmental and social challenges faced by these communities. The experiences were eye-opening. Jonah met families whose daily lives revolved around fetching water from sources often contaminated with bacteria or industrial runoff. Children missed school due to illness caused by poor water quality, and healthcare options were limited. These encounters transformed Jonah's vision, grounding it in the urgent human realities behind the data. Back in the workshop, they developed solar-powered sensors with simplified interfaces and remote reporting capabilities. The team trained local residents to install and maintain the devices, empowering communities rather than imposing external solutions. The pilot program launched with promising results, detecting contamination early and prompting swift action from local health officials. News of the project's success spread, attracting support from international aid organizations and foundations. Yet, as the network's reach grew, so did its complexity. Data privacy became a pressing concern. Some communities feared that monitoring devices could be used for surveillance or exploited by corrupt officials. Jonah realized that technology alone couldn't build trust. Transparency, dialogue, and cultural sensitivity were equally vital. He began involving community leaders in decision-making and emphasized ethical data practices in all communications. Meanwhile, Jonah's public profile continued to rise. He was featured in magazines, invited to deliver TED Talks, and even appeared on late-night television shows. While the exposure amplified his message, it also exposed him to criticism and skepticism from detractors who questioned his youth or motives. Jonah learned to navigate this scrutiny with grace, focusing on the substance of his work rather than the noise around it. The journey was not without personal sacrifices. Long hours, frequent travel, and the relentless pace strained Jonah's relationships. Moments of loneliness crept in, and he grappled with balancing ambition and self-care. Emily remained his anchor, encouraging him to set boundaries and reminding him that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. One pivotal evening, after an exhausting conference in a distant city, Jonah and Emily found themselves wandering a quiet park. The city lights twinkled around them, but Jonah's mind was heavy. He confessed his fears of losing himself in the relentless quest for impact. Emily listened intently, then shared her own struggles with balancing passion and peace. Their conversation deepened their bond and reaffirmed Jonah's commitment to leading with both heart and mind. Around the same time, Ava, the teenage prodigy Jonah had mentored, announced she was starting her own environmental startup focusing on affordable water filtration. Jonah felt a surge of pride. Watching the next generation step forward with their own ideas was both inspiring and humbling. He offered mentorship and resources, eager to support her growth. As the environmental network expanded, Jonah's team faced new technical challenges, integrating data from diverse sources, ensuring system security, and maintaining uptime in harsh conditions. The work was complex, often requiring innovative coding and hardware tweaks. Despite setbacks, the team's camaraderie and shared vision kept morale high. Jonah fostered an environment where failures were seen as learning opportunities rather than dead ends. During a high-stakes project review with potential investors, a major glitch caused data to be misrepresented. Jonah's team scrambled to diagnose and fix the problem before it became a deal-breaker. The experience was a harsh reminder of the stakes involved and the importance of meticulous attention to detail. But it also strengthened their resolve to build a robust, reliable system. Outside the technical realm, Jonah became increasingly aware of the socio-political dimensions of environmental technology. He engaged with activists, policymakers, and ethicists to understand the broader implications of his work. These conversations challenged him to think beyond immediate goals and consider long-term impacts on justice, equity, and community autonomy. Jonah began incorporating these perspectives into project planning and public messaging, striving to create technology that served people holistically. As the year progressed, Jonah found himself reflecting on how far he had come, from a curious kid with a simple question to a leader navigating a complex global ecosystem. He knew the journey was far from over, but each challenge, success, and lesson had shaped him into someone ready to face the uncertain future with resilience and hope. One evening, sitting by the window in his workshop, Jonah penned a new blog post titled, "The Power of Listening: Why Innovation Needs Heart." He wrote about the importance of humility, empathy, and community in driving meaningful change. The post resonated deeply with readers, sparking conversations and connections across diverse audiences. Jonah realized that the true power of his work lay not just in technology, but in the relationships it fostered and the hope it inspired. And as he looked out at the night sky dotted with stars, Jonah felt a quiet confidence. The journey was ongoing, filled with unknowns and possibilities, but he was ready to keep asking questions, learning, and leading. Because sometimes, the most unexpected voices, like a kid's question at a science summit, could spark a movement that changed the world. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jonah's vision was no longer just a personal mission, it had become a global movement. With the environmental network now active in dozens of countries, his days were consumed by strategy meetings, technical problem solving, and public engagements. Yet amidst the whirlwind, Jonah remained grounded by the people who had supported him from the start, Emily, Mia, Ava, and the team that had grown into a tight-knit family. One morning, Jonah received an urgent message from a remote village in Southeast Asia where their sensors had detected a sudden spike in toxic chemicals in the local river. The community depended on the river for drinking water and agriculture, so the threat was immediate and severe. Jonah and Mia coordinated a rapid response, working with local health officials and NGOs to deploy mobile filtration units and distribute clean water. The situation underscored the critical importance of their work and the lives depending on it. This crisis also revealed the limits of technology alone to solve deeply rooted problems. The pollution stemmed from illegal dumping by a factory that evaded regulations due to corruption and weak enforcement. Jonah realized that tackling environmental issues required not just innovation but systemic change involving policy, transparency, and community empowerment. The experience sparked a new initiative within Jonah's organization, a coalition dedicated to environmental justice that brought together technologists, activists, lawyers, and local leaders. The goal was to address root causes and advocate for stronger protections. Meanwhile, Jonah continued to balance the demands of leadership with his own growth. He enrolled in online courses on ethics, public policy, and social entrepreneurship to broaden his perspective. These studies challenged him to rethink assumptions and integrate diverse viewpoints into his work. Jonah also began practicing mindfulness and meditation to manage stress and maintain clarity amid chaos. One afternoon, while reviewing data trends, Jonah noticed a troubling pattern. Despite improvements in some regions, pollution levels were rising in others, particularly in rapidly urbanizing areas with inadequate infrastructure. This insight prompted a partnership with urban planners and architects to design smart cities that integrated environmental monitoring with sustainable development. The collaboration led to pilot projects in several cities, blending technology with green spaces, efficient transportation, and community engagement. Jonah's role evolved from innovator to facilitator, bringing together experts from varied fields to create holistic solutions. At a conference in New York, Jonah delivered a keynote speech that emphasized the interconnectedness of environmental, social, and economic systems. He called for a new mindset that embraced collaboration, humility, and long-term thinking. The speech was met with standing ovations and sparked lively discussions among attendees. Yet even as Jonah gained recognition and influence, he faced moments of self-doubt and fatigue. The weight of expectations, the complexity of problems, and the slow pace of change sometimes felt overwhelming. In these times, he returned to his roots, quiet walks in nature, conversations with Emily, and revisiting the original question that had started it all: what if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? This question reminded him of vulnerability and resilience, the fragility of human endeavors and the power of connection. Jonah also found inspiration in the stories shared by communities his work had touched. Letters from children in schools, testimonials from families benefiting from clean water, and messages from activists fueled his determination. He realized that impact wasn't measured only in data or accolades but in lives improved and hope kindled. As the organization expanded, Jonah prioritized fostering a culture of inclusion and well-being. He encouraged open communication, recognized team members' contributions, and supported professional development. The environment was challenging but supportive, a space where creativity and compassion thrived. One milestone was launching an annual summit that brought together stakeholders from around the world to share knowledge, celebrate successes, and strategize for the future. The summit became a powerful platform for community building and innovation. During the planning, Jonah faced a tough decision when a major sponsor proposed branding that conflicted with the organization's values. Jonah stood firm, refusing to compromise integrity for funding. The choice was risky but affirmed the organization's commitment to ethical leadership. In the months that followed, Jonah explored new frontiers, integrating AI for predictive environmental modeling, developing low-cost sensors for developing regions, and promoting citizen science initiatives that empowered individuals to contribute data. Each advancement brought new challenges and excitement. Throughout these endeavors, Jonah remained connected to his initial purpose, the desire to spark change through curiosity, courage, and collaboration. He often reflected on the unlikely journey from a kid's bold question to a movement influencing millions. One evening, during a quiet dinner with Emily, Jonah shared his hopes for the future, a world where technology served humanity and nature in harmony, where communities thrived with dignity, and where each person felt empowered to be a steward of the planet. Emily smiled and said, "You're making that future real, one step at a time." Jonah knew the road ahead was long and uncertain, but with a team he trusted, a community that believed, and a vision that inspired, he was ready to keep moving forward. And as he looked out at the stars beyond the city lights, Jonah felt a deep sense of peace and possibility, a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected voices could change the world in ways no one anticipated. The momentum Jonah's movement had gained was electrifying, but with growth came new and unexpected challenges that forced him to adapt quickly. One afternoon, Jonah received a call from Ava, his young protégé, who was excited yet nervous. She had just encountered a major setback with her water filtration startup, funding had dried up due to economic downturns, and her team was struggling to keep the project afloat. Hearing Ava's distress reminded Jonah of his own early struggles, when obstacles seemed insurmountable. He immediately offered support, connecting her with investors he trusted and sharing his network of mentors. This moment underscored the importance of community and resilience in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, Jonah's own organization was preparing for a significant expansion, a collaboration with a major international agency to deploy environmental monitoring systems in vulnerable coastal regions threatened by climate change. The project was ambitious and high stakes, requiring coordination across governments, NGOs, and local communities. Jonah found himself navigating bureaucratic hurdles and cultural differences while maintaining a clear focus on the project's mission. Late nights were filled with virtual meetings, negotiating terms, and troubleshooting technical glitches. Yet, amidst the complexity, Jonah found joy in the collective passion driving the effort. During a field visit to one of the pilot sites, Jonah witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of rising sea levels. Eroded shorelines, displaced families, and shrinking livelihoods. The human cost deepened his commitment, fueling a renewed sense of urgency and responsibility. Back at headquarters, Jonah emphasized the importance of inclusive leadership, ensuring that voices from affected communities were heard and integrated into decision-making processes. He introduced training sessions on cultural competency for his team, fostering empathy and understanding. At the same time, Jonah grappled with the challenge of maintaining innovation while scaling operations. Balancing efficiency with creativity required new management approaches. He encouraged cross-disciplinary collaboration and experimentation, creating spaces where ideas could flourish without fear of failure. These efforts paid off as the team developed novel sensor designs and community engagement models that enhanced both technical performance and social impact. Public attention on Jonah's work intensified, drawing praise but also skepticism from some corners. Critics questioned the scalability of his solutions and raised concerns about data privacy. Jonah responded transparently, hosting open forums and publishing detailed reports to build trust. He understood that accountability was essential for sustained success. One unexpected twist came when a high-profile tech company proposed a partnership to integrate Jonah's network with their smart home devices. The opportunity promised vast reach but raised ethical questions about commercialization and data use. Jonah engaged in thoughtful deliberation with his team and advisors, ultimately deciding to decline the deal to preserve the organization's values. This decision was difficult but affirmed their commitment to mission over profit. Amid these professional trials, Jonah's personal life demanded attention. Emily faced her own challenges balancing work and health, and Jonah prioritized being present and supportive. They carved out time for simple pleasures, walking in nature, cooking meals together, and sharing quiet conversations that replenished their spirits. These moments reminded Jonah that sustainability extended beyond the environment to include relationships and self-care. As the organization approached its 5th anniversary, Jonah reflected on the journey from a small startup to a global movement. The celebration was bittersweet. Some team members had moved on, while new faces brought fresh energy. Jonah took pride in the culture they had cultivated. A blend of passion, humility, and relentless hope. During the anniversary event, Jonah unveiled a new initiative aimed at empowering youth worldwide through education, mentorship, and technology access. The program sought to cultivate the next generation of environmental leaders, building on the successes of earlier educational efforts. Jonah's speech emphasized the power of curiosity and courage, inviting young people everywhere to join the movement. The response was overwhelming, with thousands signing up from diverse backgrounds. The youth initiative quickly became a vibrant community, buzzing with creativity and enthusiasm. Jonah was particularly inspired by stories of young activists overcoming local challenges with innovative solutions. This energy reinvigorated the organization and reminded Jonah that the future belonged to those willing to ask bold questions and take action. Throughout this period, Jonah remained committed to learning and growth. He attended workshops on leadership, ethics, and mental health, recognizing that effective change required holistic development. He also sought feedback from team members and stakeholders, fostering a culture of continuous improvement. In quieter moments, Jonah returned to writing, blog posts, essays, and letters that articulated his evolving vision. These writings resonated widely, sparking conversations that bridged divides and inspired collaboration. One notable post, "The Courage to Listen," explored the transformative power of empathy in innovation and activism. It became a touchstone for many in the movement. Despite the achievements, Jonah was aware that the path forward would not be easy. Climate change, social inequities, and political polarization presented formidable obstacles. But he believed deeply in the collective power of individuals and communities. He often recalled the question that launched his journey: what if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? That question remained a catalyst for compassion and connection. As the chapter closed on another chapter of his life, Jonah stood ready to face new horizons. With a dedicated team, a supportive community, and an unshakable sense of purpose, he was prepared to continue asking unexpected questions and inspiring answers that no one, not even Elon Musk, had anticipated. Jonah's growing influence in the environmental technology world brought unexpected invitations to forums and panels that gathered some of the brightest minds and most powerful leaders globally. One such event was a high-profile climate summit hosted in Washington, D.C., where Jonah was slated to speak alongside renowned scientists, policymakers, and industry titans, including Elon Musk himself. The anticipation was palpable. Jonah knew this was an opportunity not only to showcase his work but also to challenge entrenched ideas about technology, sustainability, and equity. The days leading up to the summit were a flurry of preparation. Jonah rehearsed his speech tirelessly, refining every sentence to balance technical insight with emotional resonance. He debated with his team about the best way to communicate complex data without losing the human story at the heart of his mission. On the morning of the event, Jonah arrived early at the Grand Conference Hall, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. He spotted Elon Musk across the room, engaged in animated discussions. Despite the buzz, Jonah focused on grounding himself. When it was finally his turn to speak, Jonah stepped onto the stage and looked out at the packed audience. He opened with a simple but powerful question: what if the next great innovation came not from the boardrooms of billionaires, but from the voices of children in communities most affected by climate change? The crowd was silent, drawn in by the unexpected framing. Jonah proceeded to share stories from his early days: how a single question at a science summit had ignited a movement, how communities' lived experiences shaped every solution, and how empathy must guide innovation. As he spoke, Jonah wove together data, personal anecdotes, and a call to action that transcended technology alone. When he concluded, the room erupted in applause. Elon Musk, sitting near the front, nodded thoughtfully. During the Q&A session, a surprising moment arrived when Elon asked Jonah a pointed question about the scalability and sustainability of his decentralized monitoring system. Jonah responded with clarity and humility, explaining both the technical foundations and the importance of community trust and empowerment. The exchange earned mutual respect, and later, Elon approached Jonah to discuss potential collaboration. Outside the formal sessions, Jonah navigated networking events, panel discussions, and informal conversations that expanded his perspectives. He met activists pressing for policy reforms, engineers developing renewable energy solutions, and artists using creativity to raise awareness. Each encounter enriched his understanding of the multifaceted battle against climate change. Back at the hotel, Jonah reflected on the experience. The summit had been a whirlwind but a reminder of the vast ecosystem working toward a common goal. He felt energized but also aware of the roadblocks, political inertia, misinformation, and competing interests. Jonah realized that progress required patience, persistence, and a willingness to engage even with those whose views differed. Following the summit, Jonah and Elon Musk exchanged emails exploring ways to integrate their technologies. Elon proposed using satellite data to complement ground sensors, enhancing the accuracy and reach of environmental monitoring. Jonah was intrigued but cautious, emphasizing the need for transparency and community involvement in any partnership. The discussions evolved over months, involving teams from both sides brainstorming, prototyping, and negotiating terms. Meanwhile, Jonah's organization launched a new project inspired by the summit's energy, an initiative to bring environmental education into underserved schools nationwide. The program combined hands-on science kits, virtual mentoring, and interactive storytelling to inspire curiosity and stewardship among young students. Jonah personally visited several pilot schools, witnessing the excitement of children discovering their power to impact the planet. These visits reaffirmed his belief that change starts with education and empowerment. Amid this flurry of activity, Jonah faced a personal crossroads. The relentless pace and public exposure weighed on his mental health. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he confided in Emily about feeling overwhelmed and questioning whether he could sustain this level of intensity. Emily listened with compassion, encouraging him to embrace vulnerability and seek balance. Together, they committed to creating space for rest, reflection, and renewal amid the work. Jonah began incorporating regular mindfulness practices, exercise, and time in nature into his routine. This shift not only improved his well-being but also enhanced his creativity and decision-making. It became clear that sustainability extended inward as well as outward. As the year progressed, Jonah's collaboration with Elon Musk's team bore fruit. The integrated environmental monitoring platform combined satellite imagery with ground sensor data, providing unprecedented real-time insights into pollution, deforestation, and climate impacts. The system was launched in pilot regions with significant success, helping authorities respond swiftly to emerging threats. The partnership was hailed as a model of tech synergy grounded in ethical principles. Yet, challenges remained. The complexity of data integration, cybersecurity concerns, and equitable access required ongoing attention. Jonah's team expanded to include experts in AI ethics, cybersecurity, and community engagement to address these issues holistically. Throughout these developments, Jonah remained focused on the core question that guided him: how to create technology that serves humanity and respects the planet's limits. He continued writing and speaking about the need for inclusive innovation, transparency, and the power of unexpected voices to drive change. Jonah also made time to mentor emerging leaders, believing that nurturing diverse perspectives was essential for a sustainable future. In one memorable mentoring session, a young woman from an indigenous community shared her challenges and hopes for environmental justice. Jonah listened deeply, recognizing that his movement needed to amplify such voices and incorporate indigenous knowledge into solutions. This encounter inspired a new partnership that blended traditional wisdom with modern technology. As the chapter drew to a close, Jonah stood at a pivotal moment, not just in his career but in the global movement for climate action. He understood that the journey was long and complex but filled with possibility. The unexpected question from a curious kid had evolved into a force capable of inspiring collaboration across sectors, cultures, and generations. And even Elon Musk, a titan of innovation, had been silenced by the power of that simple, profound spark. As Jonah's movement gained momentum, he encountered a new kind of challenge that no amount of technology or passion could easily solve: skepticism from communities who had long been ignored or exploited by well-meaning outsiders. On a visit to a small rural town in the Midwest, Jonah was confronted by wary locals who questioned the true intent of his environmental initiatives. They had seen promises come and go, projects that started with fanfare but left little lasting impact. Jonah understood their mistrust wasn't personal, it was rooted in history. He approached these conversations with humility, listening more than speaking, learning the stories and struggles of the people he hoped to help. Slowly, trust began to build, brick by brick. Jonah invited local leaders to co-design solutions, ensuring their knowledge and needs shaped the technology rather than being passive recipients. This participatory approach transformed skepticism into collaboration. One afternoon, as Jonah toured the town's aging water treatment facility, he met Sarah, a teacher who doubled as a community organizer. Sarah shared vivid memories of childhood illnesses linked to contaminated water and the tireless efforts of neighbors to demand change. Inspired by her dedication, Jonah worked with Sarah and her team to deploy new water sensors that provided transparent data accessible to all residents. The real-time updates empowered the community to advocate for improvements and hold officials accountable. This success story became a blueprint for Jonah's approach, technology as a tool for empowerment rather than control. Back in the organization's headquarters, Jonah led workshops on cultural sensitivity and community engagement, emphasizing that technical expertise must be coupled with empathy and respect. He encouraged his team to embrace discomfort and uncertainty as opportunities for growth. At the same time, Jonah's own worldview expanded. He began exploring the intersections of environmental justice with social issues like racial equity, economic disparity, and healthcare access. This holistic perspective deepened his conviction that sustainability was inseparable from human dignity and rights. Jonah also grappled with the tension between urgency and patience. Climate change demanded immediate action, yet meaningful change required time to build relationships and systems. Balancing these imperatives was a constant challenge. To sustain momentum, Jonah prioritized storytelling that highlighted both the struggles and victories of communities on the front lines. These narratives humanized data and inspired wider audiences. During a national conference on environmental justice, Jonah shared these stories alongside activists and scholars, sparking dialogue and partnerships that transcended disciplines. As the movement matured, Jonah faced pressure to scale rapidly and deliver measurable outcomes. Investors and partners sought quick wins and clear metrics, while Jonah knew that deeper transformation was more complex and long-term. He navigated these tensions by advocating for patience and integrity, refusing to compromise core values for expediency. This stance sometimes invited criticism, but Jonah's authenticity resonated with many. In a particularly challenging moment, a controversy erupted when a data breach exposed sensitive information collected by their sensors. Although no harm was done, the incident shook the organization and its community. Jonah took responsibility publicly, initiated a thorough review, and implemented stronger safeguards. This transparency and accountability strengthened trust over time, reinforcing the importance of ethical leadership. Throughout these trials, Jonah remained committed to his personal growth. He sought guidance from mentors and therapists, recognizing that leading a movement required emotional resilience and self-awareness. He practiced vulnerability in sharing his challenges with the team, modeling openness and courage. Outside work, Jonah found solace in his relationship with Emily and the simple joys of everyday life. They nurtured a shared commitment to mindfulness, creativity, and connection. Jonah also reconnected with old friends and hobbies, finding balance amid the intensity. One of Jonah's proudest moments came when a youth participant from their educational program won a National Science Award for an innovative environmental project inspired by Jonah's mentorship. This achievement was a testament to the ripple effect of empowering the next generation. Jonah celebrated with the young scientist, feeling a profound sense of hope and continuity. As the chapter closed, Jonah reflected on the unexpected lessons learned, that technology alone could not solve the world's problems, that humility and empathy were as vital as innovation, and that true change required listening to those whose voices had been marginalized. The journey was far from over, but Jonah's conviction burned brighter than ever. The kid who once asked a simple question had grown into a leader who understood the power of asking the right questions, and the courage to hear answers no one expected. The momentum Jonah's movement had created started to attract attention from unexpected sectors: artists, musicians, and storytellers who saw in his work a narrative of hope and resilience that transcended technology. One evening, Jonah was invited to a gallery opening in New York City where an exhibit celebrated environmental activism through multimedia art. Walking through the space, Jonah was struck by how vividly the artists translated data, stories, and emotions into powerful visual experiences. One installation, a wall-sized digital map glowing with real-time environmental sensor data from communities worldwide, was particularly moving. It transformed abstract numbers into living stories of struggle and survival. The fusion of art and science deepened Jonah's belief that communication was key to awakening collective action. He connected with several artists who expressed interest in collaborating to bring environmental data to broader audiences through immersive and emotional experiences. This interdisciplinary approach promised to reach hearts as well as minds. At the same time, Jonah's organization was preparing to launch an ambitious global youth summit on climate innovation. The event aimed to unite young leaders from diverse backgrounds to share ideas, learn from mentors, and amplify their voices on the world stage. Jonah saw this as a vital step in decentralizing leadership and nurturing a movement fueled by curiosity, creativity, and courage. The summit was a logistical challenge, involving coordination across time zones, languages, and cultures. Jonah worked closely with his team to ensure accessibility, inclusivity, and meaningful engagement. They incorporated interactive workshops, storytelling sessions, and project showcases that highlighted youth-led solutions addressing climate change, environmental justice, and sustainability. The excitement and energy of the summit were palpable. Jonah was deeply moved by the stories of young people overcoming adversity to make a difference: students from remote villages creating solar-powered irrigation systems, activists organizing local cleanups in urban food deserts, and inventors designing biodegradable packaging. Each narrative reinforced the power of individual and collective action. Throughout the summit, Jonah engaged in conversations that challenged and expanded his perspectives. He listened to indigenous youth who emphasized the importance of ancestral knowledge and respect for the earth as a living entity. He met young entrepreneurs balancing innovation with cultural preservation and environmental stewardship. These encounters enriched Jonah's understanding of what true sustainability entailed: a harmony of technology, culture, and community. Meanwhile, Jonah's partnership with Elon Musk progressed to new phases. The integrated environmental monitoring system was being adopted by several cities and regions, providing valuable data for disaster response, pollution control, and urban planning. The collaboration was hailed as a breakthrough in real-time environmental intelligence. Yet, Jonah remained vigilant about maintaining ethical standards and community involvement. He insisted on transparent data policies and local control, resisting pressures to commercialize or centralize the technology. This principled stance sometimes led to difficult negotiations, but Jonah's commitment was unwavering. Amid these professional developments, Jonah faced a personal reckoning. The relentless demands of leadership had taken a toll on his relationships and well-being. One evening, after a heated disagreement about priorities with a close colleague, Jonah realized he needed to redefine success, not just as impact or growth, but as balance, integrity, and connection. He sought counsel from Emily, whose steady presence reminded him of what truly mattered. Together, they developed new boundaries and routines to safeguard their relationship and Jonah's health. Jonah also deepened his engagement with mindfulness and creative expression, discovering that journaling and music helped him process complex emotions and stay grounded. This renewed self-awareness enhanced his leadership, allowing him to navigate challenges with greater patience and clarity. In a powerful moment at the Youth Summit's closing ceremony, Jonah delivered a keynote that synthesized his journey. He spoke candidly about the power of asking unexpected questions, the necessity of humility, and the imperative to listen deeply to diverse voices. He called on the young leaders to embrace uncertainty as a catalyst for innovation and to view setbacks as opportunities for learning. His words resonated widely, sparking conversations that extended beyond the event. Following the summit, Jonah launched a multimedia storytelling campaign that combined environmental data with artistic interpretations and personal narratives from communities worldwide. The campaign aimed to bridge the gap between information and inspiration, turning statistics into stories that moved people to care and act. It quickly gained traction on social media and in educational settings, reaching millions and fostering a sense of global interconnectedness. This fusion of art, technology, and storytelling marked a new chapter for Jonah's movement, a recognition that science alone could not sustain the fight for the planet but that imagination and empathy were essential allies. As the chapter drew to a close, Jonah reflected on the unexpected turns his journey had taken, from a curious question posed by a kid to a global movement intertwined with technology, culture, and community. He realized that true leadership was less about control and more about creating spaces where others could discover their own power and purpose. And in that, he found hope that no one, not even Elon Musk, could have predicted. Jonah's journey took an unexpected turn when he was approached by a prominent documentary filmmaker interested in capturing the story of his movement. The filmmaker, Maya, was known for her evocative storytelling and ability to highlight underrepresented voices. Jonah was initially hesitant, wary of how the narrative might be framed and concerned about exposing his team and communities to public scrutiny. After careful consideration and conversations with his closest advisors and Emily, Jonah agreed to collaborate, seeing it as an opportunity to broaden the movement's reach and inspire more people. Filming began in earnest, following Jonah and his team across different continents, capturing the highs and lows of their work. Maya's lens revealed not only the technical aspects of environmental monitoring but also the deeply human stories behind the data, the hopes, fears, and resilience of individuals and communities fighting to protect their homes. The process was both exhilarating and exhausting for Jonah. Being under the camera's constant gaze forced him to confront his vulnerabilities and articulate his vision more clearly. It also highlighted tensions within the organization as differing opinions about priorities and methods came to light. Jonah navigated these challenges by fostering open dialogue and emphasizing shared values, reinforcing the idea that imperfection and conflict were part of growth. One memorable scene in the documentary captured Jonah visiting a coastal village devastated by recent storms intensified by climate change. The footage showed him listening intently to elders recounting the loss of homes and livelihoods, then joining young volunteers rebuilding seawalls and planting mangroves. This moment embodied the intersection of technology, tradition, and community that defined Jonah's approach. As the documentary progressed, Maya and Jonah worked closely to ensure authenticity and respect for all voices featured. They involved community members in reviewing footage and providing feedback, striving to avoid exploitative narratives. This collaborative approach deepened trust and enriched the storytelling. The film's premiere was scheduled at a major international film festival, drawing a diverse audience of activists, scientists, policymakers, and general viewers. The screening sparked powerful conversations about environmental justice, innovation, and the role of youth in shaping the future. Jonah participated in panel discussions and Q&A sessions, sharing insights and answering candid questions. The exposure brought new opportunities and challenges. Media attention increased, and Jonah found himself balancing public appearances with the demands of leading a growing organization. He worked to maintain transparency and humility amidst the spotlight, recognizing that the movement was bigger than any one person. Meanwhile, the documentary highlighted the crucial role of education and mentorship in Jonah's work. Inspired by this, the organization expanded its youth programs, developing virtual platforms that connected young environmental leaders worldwide. These platforms facilitated knowledge exchange, collaborative projects, and peer support, creating a vibrant global network. Jonah took particular pride in mentoring emerging voices, believing that empowerment was key to sustained change. Throughout this period, Jonah also confronted ethical dilemmas related to technology and data privacy. As their sensor networks grew, questions arose about who controlled the data and how it was used. Jonah convened advisory councils including community representatives, ethicists, and legal experts to establish guidelines that prioritized consent, transparency, and equitable benefit sharing. This proactive stance garnered praise and set a standard in the field. On a personal level, Jonah deepened his relationship with Emily, appreciating the grounding influence she provided amid the whirlwind. They celebrated small milestones and supported each other through setbacks, building a partnership rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. Jonah reflected on the power of storytelling to transform knowledge into action, connection into community, and ideas into movement. The documentary had captured not just the external journey but the internal evolution, the courage to be vulnerable, the humility to listen, and the resilience to persevere. Jonah knew the road ahead remained uncertain and challenging, but he was more committed than ever to asking the questions no one expected and embracing the answers that could change the world. Jonah's journey took a dramatic and unexpected turn when a sudden opportunity arose to collaborate on a groundbreaking space-based environmental project. Elon Musk personally reached out with a proposal to deploy advanced sensors on SpaceX satellites to monitor Earth's ecosystems in real time. This ambitious idea promised to revolutionize environmental data collection by providing an unparalleled global perspective on climate patterns, deforestation, pollution, and more. Jonah was both exhilarated and cautious. The prospect of integrating satellite technology with his community-based sensors held immense potential, but it also raised complex questions about data governance, equity, and the role of private corporations in public environmental efforts. Over several months, Jonah and his team worked closely with Musk's engineers and data scientists to design a system that balanced innovation with transparency and inclusivity. They established protocols to ensure that the data collected would be openly accessible to communities, researchers, and policymakers worldwide rather than proprietary or restricted. The technical challenges were formidable, ensuring sensor accuracy from orbit, managing vast data streams, and creating user-friendly interfaces for diverse stakeholders. Jonah's team leaned into these challenges, driven by the conviction that technology must serve humanity, not control it. As the project advanced, Jonah traveled to SpaceX headquarters in California, where he witnessed the scale and ambition of Musk's vision firsthand. The sleek rocket designs, cutting-edge labs, and intense work ethic impressed him, yet he remained mindful of his mission to keep the human element central. During meetings, discussions often pivoted between technical feasibility and ethical responsibility. Musk's enthusiasm was contagious, but Jonah insisted on deliberate reflection, advocating for robust community involvement in shaping the project's trajectory. The launch day arrived amid global anticipation. When the satellites carrying the new sensor successfully reached orbit, Jonah felt a profound mix of awe and hope. For the first time, the real-time environmental monitoring system would provide comprehensive data spanning continents, oceans, and remote ecosystems. The implications for disaster response, conservation, and climate policy were immense. Initial data streams confirmed early successes, tracking wildfires in Australia, mapping deforestation in the Amazon, and monitoring urban air quality in major cities. Communities equipped with ground sensors could now compare local observations with satellite data, enhancing understanding and response capabilities. Yet, the project also surfaced tensions. Some critics questioned the reliance on private space companies for public environmental monitoring, raising concerns about accountability and data ownership. Others warned about potential surveillance risks and digital divides. Jonah engaged these critiques openly, emphasizing the need for transparent governance and equitable access. To address these concerns, the project team organized public forums, invited independent audits, and partnered with nonprofit organizations specializing in digital rights and environmental justice. Jonah's leadership in fostering inclusive dialogue strengthened trust and demonstrated a commitment to ethical innovation. Meanwhile, the expanded data platform catalyzed new scientific discoveries and community actions. Researchers identified previously unknown patterns of biodiversity loss, enabling targeted conservation efforts. Grassroots activists used the data to advocate for stronger environmental regulations and corporate accountability. Educators incorporated satellite imagery and sensor data into curricula, inspiring students with real-world examples of technology in service of the planet. Jonah found particular inspiration in the stories of youth activists using the data to hold polluters accountable and propose creative solutions. Their energy and vision reminded him of the power of unexpected voices to drive transformation. As the chapter progressed, Jonah grappled with the personal challenges of balancing his expanding responsibilities with self-care and relationships. The scale of the space-based project demanded long hours and frequent travel, straining his connection with Emily and his own well-being. Recognizing these strains, Jonah renewed his commitment to mindfulness practices and open communication. Emily became an essential partner in navigating these pressures, supporting him while encouraging healthy boundaries. The experience deepened Jonah's understanding that sustainability was not only a planetary imperative but also a personal one. In a poignant moment, Jonah visited a remote indigenous community that had long stewarded their ancestral lands with deep ecological knowledge. Sharing the satellite data with them, he witnessed how traditional wisdom and cutting-edge technology could complement each other, enriching understanding and empowering stewardship. This encounter reaffirmed his belief in the necessity of bridging cultures, knowledge systems, and technologies to address global challenges holistically. As the chapter drew to a close, Jonah reflected on the remarkable journey from a curious kid's question to a pioneering environmental movement spanning Earth and space. The partnership with Elon Musk had pushed boundaries in ways no one had expected, blending innovation with ethics, ambition with humility. Jonah understood that the road ahead would be full of unforeseen challenges, but he remained driven by the conviction that asking the right questions, and listening deeply, could unlock solutions that truly serve humanity and the planet. In this unfolding story of collaboration, courage, and creativity, Jonah found not just hope but the beginnings of a new paradigm, one where technology, humanity, and nature coexist in dynamic harmony. Following the success of the space-based environmental project, Jonah's movement experienced a surge in global influence, but with it came an unexpected and daunting challenge, navigating political resistance and misinformation campaigns aimed at undermining their work. Governments and corporations with vested interests in maintaining the status quo began pushing back, casting doubt on the accuracy of the data and the motivations behind the movement. Jonah quickly realized that scientific evidence and compelling storytelling alone were not enough to overcome entrenched skepticism and opposition. The battle for truth and trust required new strategies and alliances. Jonah assembled a diverse coalition of scientists, journalists, activists, and legal experts to combat misinformation and advocate for transparency and accountability. They developed rapid response teams to fact-check false claims, produce accessible educational materials, and engage with communities affected by disinformation. This effort was both exhausting and essential, as misinformation spread rapidly through social media and partisan outlets. In one particularly tense episode, a smear campaign falsely accused Jonah's organization of manipulating environmental data for political gain. The allegations gained traction online, threatening to derail years of progress. Jonah responded with a detailed public report, independent audits, and open forums where critics and supporters alike could ask questions. His openness and willingness to engage diffused much of the tension, restoring some confidence. At the same time, Jonah deepened his understanding of the psychological and social dynamics fueling misinformation. He recognized that fear, identity, and distrust of authority were powerful forces that required empathy and patience to address. He advocated for dialogue that acknowledged people's concerns without dismissing them, seeking common ground and shared values. This approach led to some surprising breakthroughs, including partnerships with local leaders in skeptical communities who helped bridge divides and foster constructive conversations. Meanwhile, the environmental crises themselves intensified, with extreme weather events, wildfires, and biodiversity loss making headlines worldwide. The urgency of the situation galvanized many to support Jonah's cause, but it also heightened tensions and stakes. Jonah's team worked tirelessly to translate complex data into actionable insights for policymakers and the public, emphasizing solutions that balanced environmental, economic, and social considerations. Jonah found himself increasingly involved in international forums and negotiations, advocating for science-based policies and equitable climate action. He navigated these arenas with a blend of technical expertise, humility, and passion, earning respect from diverse stakeholders. Yet, the pressure took a toll on his personal life. Jonah struggled with feelings of isolation and burnout, grappling with the weight of responsibility. Emily remained a steadfast source of support, encouraging him to seek professional help and reminding him that sustainable change required sustainable leadership. Through therapy and self-reflection, Jonah learned to delegate more effectively, build resilient teams, and prioritize mental health. This personal growth enhanced his capacity to lead with empathy and vision. During this period, Jonah also faced ethical questions about the limits of technology in solving environmental problems. He encountered advocates calling for radical reductions in consumption and systemic changes beyond technological fixes. Jonah engaged these critiques thoughtfully, acknowledging the complexity of sustainability and the need for multifaceted approaches that included cultural, economic, and political transformation. He embraced a more nuanced vision of progress, one that respected ecological limits, social justice, and human well-being. One pivotal moment came when Jonah visited a community displaced by flooding worsened by climate change. Hearing their stories of loss and resilience deeply moved him, reinforcing the human stakes of his work. He pledged to amplify the voices of vulnerable populations and integrate social equity into every aspect of the movement. As the chapter concluded, Jonah reflected on the unpredictable nature of his journey, the triumphs and setbacks, the moments of doubt and inspiration. He understood that no single person or technology held all the answers. Instead, progress depended on collaboration, courage, and an unwavering commitment to asking the difficult questions no one else dared to voice. This realization strengthened his resolve to continue pushing boundaries and embracing complexity, knowing that the future depended on bold ideas and collective action that no one, not even Elon Musk, could have fully anticipated. As Jonah's movement matured, he began to realize that the greatest challenges and opportunities lay not only in technology or policy but in culture, shifting how people related to the environment and to each other. He noticed that despite the wealth of data and growing awareness, many remained disconnected from the urgency or felt powerless to affect change. This disconnect inspired Jonah to pioneer a new initiative focused on storytelling as a tool for cultural transformation. Drawing on his experiences with Maya's documentary and the multimedia campaign, Jonah envisioned a global platform where personal narratives, art, music, and technology converge to awaken empathy and inspire action. He called it the Earth Story Project. The platform invited individuals worldwide to share their stories of environmental connection, loss, and hope, blending traditional media with virtual reality experiences and interactive data visualizations. Jonah believed that by humanizing environmental issues and connecting people across cultures and geographies, the project could foster a deeper sense of shared responsibility and possibility. Building the platform required assembling a diverse team of technologists, artists, educators, and activists. Jonah was intentional about inclusivity, ensuring that voices from marginalized and indigenous communities were centered rather than sidelined. The development process was iterative and collaborative, involving workshops and feedback sessions with community members around the globe. The launch of the Earth Story Project was met with enthusiasm and curiosity. Early contributions ranged from a Maasai elder's reflections on land stewardship to a young urban activist's VR tour of a city park transformed by community care. The platform became a vibrant tapestry of experience and perspective, bridging science and soul. Jonah watched as the project sparked new connections and collaborations, inspiring local actions and policy dialogues. Schools integrated the platform into curricula, using stories and immersive content to engage students in environmental learning. Artists used it as a gallery and stage to reach broader audiences. Activists leveraged it to build solidarity across borders. Alongside this cultural endeavor, Jonah continued to nurture technological innovation and advocacy. He maintained partnerships with space agencies, governments, and nonprofits to expand environmental monitoring and data accessibility. Yet he increasingly emphasized that technology must be accompanied by shifts in values, education, and community engagement to be truly transformative. Jonah's public speeches began to reflect this holistic vision, weaving together science, art, ethics, and spirituality. He challenged audiences to rethink humanity's place in the web of life and to embrace a mindset of care and reciprocity rather than domination. His message resonated deeply in a world grappling with crisis and uncertainty. During this period, Jonah also encountered moments of profound personal growth. The intensity of his work prompted him to explore practices that nurtured resilience and presence, including meditation, nature immersion, and creative expression. He found that these practices enriched his leadership and connected him more deeply with his purpose. Emily remained a constant companion and co-creator in this journey, sharing in both the joys and struggles. Their relationship evolved into a partnership rooted in mutual growth and shared commitment to a better world. As the Earth Story project gained momentum, Jonah reflected on the paradoxes of progress, the tension between individual and collective, science and art, innovation and tradition. He embraced complexity and uncertainty as inherent to transformation rather than obstacles to overcome. This perspective allowed him to approach challenges with curiosity and compassion. In a poignant moment, Jonah participated in an international gathering of indigenous leaders, artists, and scientists. Together, they crafted a declaration affirming the rights of nature and the importance of cultural diversity and environmental stewardship. This declaration became a guiding framework for Jonah's movement, grounding technological advancement in respect for life's interconnectedness. Jonah standing on a hillside overlooking a bewildered landscape, a place where technology, culture, and nature coexisted in harmony. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and resolve, knowing the journey was far from over but hopeful that through collective imagination and action, a new story for the earth was emerging. Jonah's voice echoed a question that had started it all: what if we dared to listen to the unexpected? What if we chose hope? What if, together, we changed everything? As Jonah's influence expanded globally, he faced the daunting task of sustaining momentum amid growing complexity. His movement had inspired millions, but with scale came fragmentation and diverse agendas that threatened unity. Jonah understood that leadership now meant weaving together a vast, decentralized network of voices, ideas, and actions without losing sight of core values. To address this, he initiated the creation of the Global Stewardship Council, a representative body designed to embody diversity, equity, and shared governance. The council included scientists, indigenous elders, youth leaders, technologists, artists, policymakers, and activists from every continent. Their mission was to guide the movement's vision, resolve conflicts, and coordinate strategies for maximum impact. Establishing the council was a monumental challenge. Jonah facilitated intensive dialogues to build trust, negotiate differences, and craft a charter that honored cultural wisdom and modern innovation alike. These sessions were often fraught with tension, as historic injustices and power imbalances surfaced. Jonah's patience, empathy, and commitment to transparency proved crucial in navigating these complexities. The council quickly became a dynamic forum for co-creating solutions. They prioritized initiatives that addressed climate justice, biodiversity conservation, and equitable access to technology and education. Under Jonah's guidance, the council promoted policies that challenged extractive industries and advocated for systemic changes to economic and political structures. Jonah also emphasized the importance of storytelling and cultural exchange within the council, believing that understanding one another's experiences was foundational to effective collaboration. This approach fostered deep bonds and inspired innovative ideas that transcended borders. Meanwhile, Jonah remained mindful of the movement's grassroots roots. He championed local autonomy and empowered regional hubs to tailor actions to their unique contexts while aligning with the global vision. This balance of decentralization and cohesion allowed the movement to be resilient and adaptive. Amid these organizational efforts, Jonah continued to confront personal and public challenges. The relentless pace and responsibility sometimes overwhelmed him. He wrestled with doubt and exhaustion but found renewal in community, nature, and creative expression. Emily's unwavering support and the council's solidarity were pillars of strength. One defining moment came when the council convened an emergency summit in response to a catastrophic climate event, a series of unprecedented wildfires and floods that displaced millions. The summit galvanized swift coordinated action, combining immediate relief with long-term resilience planning. Jonah's leadership shone as he articulated a vision that balanced urgency with hope, emphasizing the power of collective care and innovation. The summit also amplified calls for systemic change, including dismantling fossil fuel dependence and investing in regenerative economies. Public and media attention surged, casting Jonah and the movement into the spotlight once again. Jonah used this platform to highlight stories of frontline communities and youth activists, insisting that their voices be central to decision-making. He urged global audiences to recognize their shared humanity and responsibility. As the chapter closed, Jonah reflected on the paradoxes of leadership, the burden and privilege, the solitude and connection, the challenge and joy. He acknowledged that the path forward would be neither simple nor linear but reaffirmed his faith in the movement's capacity to evolve and thrive. Jonah's story had become a testament to the power of unexpected questions and courageous answers, a living reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope and action could illuminate a new way forward. The world was listening, and the future was still unwritten. The journey that began with a single unexpected question had transformed into a global movement reshaping how humanity viewed its relationship with the planet and each other. Jonah stood at a crossroads, reflecting on the years of trials, triumphs, and transformation while looking ahead to the uncertain future. In the closing chapter of this remarkable story, Jonah faced what felt like the most profound test yet: how to ensure that the movement he helped ignite would endure beyond his own leadership and continue evolving in ways no one could foresee. Jonah had come to understand that true change was not about individual heroism but about building resilient communities and systems capable of adapting, learning, and growing. To that end, he dedicated himself to cultivating leadership at every level, mentoring young activists and innovators and encouraging decentralization so the movement could flourish organically across cultures and contexts. He also embraced humility, acknowledging that no one person, or even group, could have all the answers. Instead, the future depended on collective wisdom, courage, and creativity. The final chapter opens with Jonah reflecting on the impact of the movement through a series of powerful stories from diverse voices around the world. A young woman in the Philippines shares how local sensor data combined with satellite imagery helped her community prepare for typhoons, saving lives and livelihoods. An indigenous elder in the Amazon recounts how blending traditional ecological knowledge with new technology strengthened stewardship of ancestral lands. A teenager in Detroit describes how storytelling and art inspired by the Earth Story Project mobilized youth to clean polluted neighborhoods and advocate for environmental justice. These narratives illustrate the movement's core truth, that change is possible when people connect across boundaries, listen deeply, and act together with love and respect. As the story unfolds, Jonah participates in a global summit marking the 10th anniversary of the movement's founding. The event draws thousands, from grassroots organizers to world leaders, celebrating achievements and charting the path forward. In a stirring keynote speech, Jonah revisits the question that started it all: what if we dared to listen to the unexpected? He shares lessons learned about resilience, empathy, and the power of hope to transform despair into action. The audience responds with standing ovations and renewed commitment. The summit also highlights ongoing challenges. Climate change intensifying, social inequalities persisting, and new uncertainties emerging. Jonah emphasizes that the journey is far from over and calls for continued innovation, collaboration, and courage. He urges everyone to embrace complexity and uncertainty as opportunities for growth rather than reasons for fear. Toward the end of the chapter, Jonah and Emily walk through a re-wilded urban park, a symbol of the movement's promise and potential. They talk about the future they envision, one where technology serves life, where communities thrive in harmony with nature, and where each person recognizes their role in the web of life. Jonah reflects on the surprises along the way, the moments when unexpected questions led to breakthroughs, when vulnerability became strength, and when diverse voices created new pathways forward. The story concludes with a powerful, hopeful message: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. Jonah's journey reminds us that the answers we seek often lie in the questions no one else dares to ask, and that together, we can change everything. The final lines invite the reader to join the movement, to ask their own unexpected questions, and to be part of a future shaped by courage, compassion, and connection. As the screen fades to black, the words linger. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The end is not an end, it's a beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?